Hello, Scream Demons, and welcome to the Screams from the Basement podcast with Sam and Casey.
This is a horror podcast in which two horror fans discuss all things horror, including news, recent watches, horror collectibles, and more.
I am one of your co-hosts, and I definitely blush. I'm Casey.
And I'm Sam.
and let's get
screaming.
Sam,
How's
I'm
it going?
excited. It's going good. I'm excited to talk about this topic that we have scheduled here for today's show. I'm excited to. I'm actually excited to talk about a comic book movie for the first time in like 3 years. It's wild. We now live in an age where I'm borderline like ready for a break from comic book movies, but we're not getting one tonight. We're not ready for that break. We're talking about two of the best sequels of all time in terms of comic book movies. We're talking Guillermo Del Toro's Blade 2 and Hellboy 2. But Sam, we're not alone.
We're not. We're never alone.
Well, no, we are never alone. Jesus is always here with us on this show. But we can maybe do one better this time around. He has the same haircut as the one and only Jesus Christ. He is Jon Runyan. Jon, welcome to the show.
Hello, thank you guys so much for having me tonight.
Oh my God, thanks for being on, man. This has been a long time coming, I feel like.
The crossover that just needed to happen.
Yeah.
It was only a matter of time before this crossover happened. Like every great comic book crossover.
Exactly. Sometimes you just gotta summon all the dark forces in the area code, and I'm not saying we're it, but we're a good portion.
We're there.
We bring the darkness.
Yeah, we bring the spooky side of the local podcast sphere of nerds between Screams from the Basement and your brand new show.
That's right, Comics by Night. And just really quick, you guys, it has been on a little bit of a break, but it is coming back. I'm so excited to hit the books again. I even brought my bouquet freshly cut. I just fed an annoyed neighbor to it earlier today, so it's very happy right now. But looking forward to flipping some more pages, getting back into those spooky books, especially from the 60s. Great stuff. More to come on that. Comics by Night, baby.
Woo!
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Also, before the camera started rolling, can we just give a shout out to our homeboy on disc, on CD. We were discussing the finest of musical delights, and that is Limp Bizkit.
We are all fans of Limp Bizkit. I knew Sam liked Limp Bizkit. Jon, I had no idea. I think this makes me want to just go across the screen and give you a hug right now that you love Limp Bizkit.
There you go.
I've said it many times before. Mr. Frederick Durst is like the Beethoven of our time.
True songbird.
We should do a Fred Durst episode and talk
because he's directed.
Terrible. He's directed a horror movie and it's terrible. Yeah. The one with John Travolta.
Yeah, The Fanatic with Devon Sawa, right?
Yeah. It's so bad. It's so bad. It's good though.
Yeah. Oh God. All right, Jon. We'll have you back on for Fred Durst movies.
I will watch them just to. I gotta speed learn this because I don't know that I've ever seen this. I did not know this was a thing, so I will 100% check.
I think he only has one movie. I think it's The Fanatic. I think that's his one and only so far.
There's got to be a horror movie with Limp Bizkit cameoing somewhere, though, right? Like there's a party scene where they're playing Nookie in the background. Like has to be.
There has to be, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, no, absolutely. And just see if you can get him on the show in the director capacity, because I bet he would eat that opportunity up.
Oh God, that would be so awesome.
That would be a ton of fun to have him on here. Jon, we have one more thing to talk about before we get into our usual spiel of the show. Let's get into it. This episode is going to drop on Friday. We're recording now here on Tuesday night. People are watching live. You guys can comment along as we're going. on this show. But John, what is this big event coming up on Friday that you have a little involvement with?
Yeah, so we through SuperCon, local comic book convention here in the Sioux Falls area, we decided, what if we threw a party to celebrate cosplayers? Cosplayers are individuals that dress up as superheroes and villains and other characters, and they put a lot of time and effort into those looks. And it goes from anywhere from beginner level all the way up to boom, nearly identical to what you're seeing on the screen or reading about in the book. And it's just such a neat trade. And the one thing that we like at SuperCon is giving back to the community, and cosplayers are great at that. There's several groups in town that give back to the community. So the whole point of the Super Snowball, it is a winter-themed gala for cosplayers to celebrate them and celebrate the coolness that is cosplay. And we threw the coolness tagline in there because if there's one thing we know how to do here in the Midwest, it's to be wintry. So we definitely have that going for us. On Friday, if you are in the Sioux Falls area, Icon Event Hall downtown, February 2nd, doors open at 6 p.m., $10 at the door, 18 plus. And with that, you just get an evening of hanging out with other cosplayers. We will have some guests on hand you can grab photos with them and you can ask them questions about their looks and see if you can learn and network a little bit in the cosplay community. Guests include the Sioux Falls Sanderson sisters, so featuring the gals from Hocus Pocus, awesome, and they're amazing human beings, love them. South Dakota Heroes and Villains, so that's going to be like your Avengers, heroes and villains that you're seeing on the big screen. And then finally, the South Dakota Ghostbusters, a staple here in the 605, and all have just been great at getting out in the community, making people's days, and that's what it's all about, is just having fun with it. In addition to that, we'll have a couple of vendors there. So for those of you that have attended SuperCon, we have the Vo Devil Cabaret will be vendoring there. Bamboo Panel Studios, I might know a thing or two about that. Going to be tabling there. And so local comic book publishing company, I happen to be a part of it. But it's going to be a lot of fun, you guys. And we actually will have in hand our first Ashcan issue, which is a preview issue of our projects to come later this year. So that'll be on sale. And then on top of that, we will have the SuperCon table with a ton of cool prizes. They're actually all in my living room right now. So Shane was not kidding around when he said, yep, let's go ahead and do that unicorn ring toss. But the prizes are actually kind of impressive, including there's a SuperCon banner signed by Jim Cummings. So that is insane. I was like, that's coming with me to this? Are you sure? You know, because I thought it
might not make it there. It might end up on your wall in your living room.
You know, but I just was floored. And so this has been really you know, well, everyone that's guesting here is super excited. The other guest I did want to lift up, though, Mr. Wyatt Bills is going to be there for doing photography. So he'll have portraits he'll be able to take of guests available for purchase, but he does really good work. And then also, rumor has it that CJ, the DJ from Epic Sounds, is literally doing like a couple of nerd blends. He said that he has hip hop blended with Final Fantasy music. I am so excited about this, you guys. Like getting tipsy to like FF7, and I'm just like, I'm gonna keep an ear open all night for this. And I told him, you need to email me those. I really want those. So that makes me super happy. So the DJ is putting in extra time to make sure like all of the groups are represented, that there's some nerd, you know, minutia up in there, some mixes, stuff like that. And he just is really good at what he does. So it's going to be a good time, you guys. And you'll see me noodling around there, have my hair down, looking more like I'm on Comics by Night, but I'll have a blue fabric instead of my red because it's supposed to be icy. So yeah, I'm excited for this one. It came together, you know, nicely, and the public's response to it, I think, is what's been most infectious about this whole thing for me. SuperCon definitely has a strong support, and rightfully so. And yeah, that's just kudos to all of us. That's not just cosplay or programming, but that's going to be you guys with film festival, everything. So
what's the over-under on CJ playing some Limp Bizkit for us on Friday?
You know, I'll ask him, and
you should tell him
make that happen.
We need some rolling on that playlist.
Yeah, we need some rolling. Yeah,
we need a Limp Bizkit Super Mario mashup.
I will ask him. Actually, ask him right now.
Or at least like a Need for Speed or GTA rolling cover.
Yeah.
Or Mario. Never mind. Mario Kart. We're gonna keep Sam's Mario.
Yeah.
It's Mario Kart, but with rolling. Yeah. Coming up with ideas right here on the spot.
Boom. Done. All right.
Sweet. I will be there as well. Maybe I'll dress up as our Lord and Savior Fred Durst for my cosplay.
Yeah.
I don't know.
His Coachella look. You got to go with the dad look. The gray comb over, the weird aviator tinted glasses.
I'm not that gray yet.
Yeah, but I'm saying there's hair dye, Casey.
Maybe for one night only.
Silver foxes are all the rage now.
Especially if they're named Fred Durst.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's coming up this Friday. Go check out everything. Just follow SuperCon on all their socials. You can get all the full deets there. You can see me and John probably just standing in the back or hanging out. I don't know. Who knows?
Wallflowers.
Yeah. Sam, what do we got going on here for the rest of the show? What is our first topic of discussion?
Well, I added some screaming mad news before we even decided what the topic of this episode was, because I just got really excited. An episode ago, we talked about how Christopher Landon had exited Scream 7 as the director. I was very upset about that. He is absolutely one of my favorite horror directors working today. He has announced his new project that he signed on for, and it's a freaking werewolf movie. I'm so excited. I can't wait to see Christopher Landon take on werewolves. There was a title attached. I didn't put it in the show notes.
But it involves werewolves.
Werewolves, and it looks awesome.
Let's just guess which 80s mashup this is going to be with a werewolf.
It's gonna be Dirty Dancing with a werewolf.
Okay.
Yep.
I was gonna say a werewolf's day off is my pick.
Ooh. But what if it was a redo of Wolf Cop?
Oh yeah.
What if?
Does Wolf Cop need a remake? That's already a masterpiece.
It truly is an American classic.
It is.
It is.
Yeah.
Better than American Werewolf in London, better than The Howling. It's just the GOAT.
Whoa.
I'm totally kidding. But
There's some heavy.
Wolf Cop rules, though.
Yeah, it does.
The theme song's banging too.
Yeah, it is.
So yeah, that's it for Scream Mad News. I just wanted to give a shout out. I know we were talking about how we were bummed last episode on that, and we didn't have to be bummed for long. Christopher Landon's back, and I couldn't be happier. So, Casey, now we move on to the next part of the episode. You have nothing in the notes. John, I don't know if you've been doing anything lately, but what have you guys been doing?
Sam, I failed you. I have not watched a single horror movie besides the two movies we're talking about since we last recorded. What I've been doing, we can maybe you and I can touch on this for like literally 30 seconds. We watched the Royal Rumble.
Yeah.
Together. So that's like all
fun.
I've been watching leading up to that. So that's what my last 2 weeks looked like, was watching old Royal Rumbles, because for wrestling fans, the Royal Rumble is Christmas. And we had our Christmas this past Saturday. Our boy Cody Rhodes won.
Yep.
My pick Bailey won. So I was very excited about that.
My girl Liv Morgan got hosed.
Hey, she came back.
Hosed.
She's at least back.
She's at least back, but hosed.
She did good. She eliminated Jade.
Yeah, that's true. Liv Morgan's a badass.
My doing net might be a little more extensive just because lately it's been like work, but I have not been on the show at all, technically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this will be a first for me. I gotta say, I had a buddy introduce me to the Wolfman. So I honestly have not seen a lot of these classic horror movies before. And I got to watch the one with Anthony Hopkins in it. So it was a newer rendition of it. But then I went back and watched the old one right afterwards. And it was so cool to see the roots of where it hailed from. And then I watched the old Dracula on top of that too. It was actually, I think while I was working on these and building all that stuff, maybe, or no, we already shot it by then. I don't know. I was working on something and it was just the best time ever because I'm watching these amazing movies while I'm crafting or whatever, and it was a lot of fun. So I definitely look forward to watching more vintage scary movies just because it's good to understand the roots and appreciate where we came from. So
yeah, absolutely. Dude, I love the old Universal monster movies. I've got a giant Blu-ray box set of like 30 of them.
heck yeah.
Did you like the remake of The Wolfman? Did you like that one?
Yeah, I thought it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It reminded me a lot of, there's been some renditions of Dracula that have a lot of like bad CGI where the bats go crazy everywhere, and I love that
Yeah.
visual. I always have. It made me tolerate Morbius. So, and that was a tough one. But I love the bats going everywhere thing. So a lot of the Dracula movies, have that in it. And this reminded me of that kind of a vibe. It was that same time period where we're starting to dabble a little bit more, but it was a good story. And the acting I thought was good. So.
Yeah, I love that one. I think it's underrated. It's one of the better horror remakes, especially from that decade. So
yeah, I'd watch it every Halloween. So
yeah, it's rad.
I actually have never seen the remake of The Wolfman. Maybe we'll have to
seriously?
do an episode on that. Yeah,
We
I've
should.
never seen it. Yeah,
we should. Dude, it's pretty badass. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Sam, I know you got a list. What have you been doobie doing lately?
Oh man, I've been doobie doing. I've watched a lot of wrestling too. But so a while back I don't know, last week I posted on TikTok that I had a pretty good Blu-ray haul. So I watched a little bit. One wasn't from the Blu-ray haul. One I watched Destroy All Neighbors after you talked about it so highly on the last episode. You said I would probably love it. You were right. This is a prog rock splatterpunk like nightmare fest with Alex Winter under heavy prosthetics, hamming it up with the phoniest Russian accent I've ever heard in my life. It's so fun. This was just like a blast from start to finish. Couldn't believe that it was able to keep the energy that it had for the entire runtime, because so many of these movies there's like always a lull about halfway through. I did not feel that with this one. I felt like it just kept its foot on the gas the entire time. Really love Destroy All Neighbors. That's on Shudder now. I watched the very first one, Hell House LLC, also on Shudder. That movie is fucking terrifying. I watched parts of it through my fingers. I'm
gonna guess it was the bedroom scene with someone standing in the doorway, or like they're like or like the door is open.
Oh yeah, yes, yeah, that one. I thought you were talking about the very final sequence, and I'm like, that's weirdly like the third act when it starts like explaining what happened. It's less scary to me, but the build up to it is so effective that it just like I haven't really stopped thinking about this movie since I watched it, and that's always a good sign. So Hell House LLC was it was one of the more terrifying movies I've ever seen. I think it paired really well with Lake Mungo, which is another like faux documentary style horror movie that really got under my skin in a much different way than this one did. But just oof. Yeah. Good stuff. Because we're doing Blade 2 for this, and I hadn't watched either Blade or Blade 2 in quite some time. I rewatched the first Blade, and oh my god, that movie's a ton of fun. Stephen Dorff is a really good villain. The CG is not very good, but beyond that, like they don't make superhero movies like that anymore. And I dig this one. It's a nice little slice of late 90s superhero / action horror. And I feel like this is gonna put me on the hit list of a lot of people, maybe even you guys. I feel like this is a precursor to The Matrix, and I'd rather watch Blade 10 times over than a Matrix movie. That's just Just my 2 cents. Anyways, apropos of the Blu-ray haul, I also got the Critters box set. It's just the first 4 movies. It does not have Critters Attacks in it, which is okay because up until I bought this box set, Critters Attacks was the only one that I'd ever seen start to finish. And I don't care for that one as much. It's not my thing. But I watched Critters 1 and 2, and they're totally my thing. Critters has, Dee Wallace, Scott Grimes, who I was just watching on the TED TV series that just dropped on Peacock. I was expecting middle-aged Scott Grimes for some reason when I saw his name in the credits, and then he pops up and he's like a 13-year-old kid, and it kind of blew my mind. He's in the first 2. He's really good in both of them, and I really enjoyed both of them. Critters 2 is an Easter horror movie through and through. It is dripping with pastel aesthetic and the whole thing is painted in Easter. There's an Easter bunny in the background of every frame. There's like an egg basket sitting in the corner, and and then the critter eggs have like a prominent role in it being Easter, which is really fun. And Critters 2 created the giant critter ball that's iconic now in horror cinema. So yeah, really love the first 2 Critters movies. Can't wait to watch 3 and 4. Probably hear about them on the next episode because I'm burning through them pretty quick. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that's what I've been doing. Other than that, not much else. It's been kind of crazy busy at work, so I've been coming home and sleeping.
Yeah, I feel that we've been just rewatching King of the Hill just at night, and it's like that's all I want to watch when I come home now. King of the Hill.
Yep.
One of the great Halloween episodes is in like the first season of King. Maybe it's the second.
Yeah.
Season of King of the Hill. It's an incredible Halloween episode. So
yep, the one where Hank ends up going like trick or treating.
Yeah, where he's the devil.
Yeah, he's the devil. Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
I love that episode.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to do that around Halloween. Do another TV horror episode.
Yes.
All right. Well, let's get into our this might be the fastest we've ever gotten into our main topic. We're 23 minutes in and we're already there. I feel like it usually takes us like an hour to get here, but
we're being efficient this episode.
We're being efficient this episode. Well, the topic for this episode is one that we came up with as soon as like we started Screams from the Basement. It's a topic we wanted to talk about. We came up with the episode title Sequel Del Toro like as soon as we wanted to do these 2 movies. It's not a great title, Sequel Del Toro, but it's 100%.
But it's the first one we came up with it, and we stuck, and we just stuck with it.
It's stuck.
Also, full disclosure, this episode was literally just an excuse to get Casey to finally watch Hellboy 2. 100%. I've been harassing him about it forever. So
yeah, 100% it is. Also, like we'll get into it here in just a second. Blade 2 is one of my favorite comic book movies ever. So anytime I can talk about Blade 2, I'm down for it. So we're talking Guillermo Del Toro sequels. We're talking, I believe these are the only sequels he's ever directed, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think you're right.
And the first one I'm going to be talking about is 2002's Blade 2, which is one of his first English language films that he directed. It's kind of crazy to see like the guy who made like Mimic and The Devil's Backbone gets this like big budget Hollywood comic book movie before comic book movies were really big. But let's take it back to 2002. Talking Blade 2. What was your guys' first memory of watching this movie? When did you guys watch it? I didn't watch it in theaters, but I'm curious if maybe you guys did or watched it on home video. John, what about you? Do you remember the first time you watched the masterpiece, Blade 2?
Yes. Definitely not in theaters. I can say that. And that's a huge regret of mine. If they ever do it on the big screen, I would absolutely go. Because it is well, I shouldn't spoil how I feel about it, but it's a darn good movie. It was fun.
Yeah.
But no, I believe that I probably would have just either purchased. I went on a DVD spree like in the early 2000s into like just shortly after graduating college in 2008, something in there. So I just had a ton of discs that I accumulated, and Blade was right up there with what I was into and digging.
Yeah.
Sam, what was your first time?
So my first time is super hazy. But I distinctly remember, and it might have been the first Blade, to be honest with you, but my first memory of Blade is I went over to my neighbor's house. So I lived next door to this old couple in a small town where I was like one of the only kids. Every once in a while, their grandson, who was my age, would come visit, right? And I'd go over there and we'd hang out. And sometimes his grandpa would just be like, my neighbor would just be playing like very much not appropriate for maybe like a 7-year-old movie. And he'd just have it on the TV, and he didn't care that we were, playing in the other room or whatever, or even if we walked in and started watching it. And I like distinctly remember Blade and watching that over there, and it just like grossing me out for one thing. Because it was like maybe my first introduction to just gore in general. And it just, yeah, I think it might have been the first one, but then obviously like later in high school, it was like when I started getting into horror and started getting into superhero movies more, I got them on DVD and revisited them. And I always thought they were good. On rewatching them, I personally I think these first two are great. I think they really need to be higher up in the conversation of great comic book movies. I was shocked to see both of them actually at like a 57% on Rotten Tomatoes. I'm like, how do you watch these movies and not think like, I don't know. That baffles me a little bit. But yeah, that's kind of my history with Blade. Like I said, it's a little hazy, but that's what it is. What about you, Casey?
I distinctly remember going to Walmart in high school, and this was when Walmart still had the 4-pack movies. It's when they still actually had a movie section. But this is when they had the 4-pack movies, and they had Blade 1, Blade 2, Blade Trinity, and the Blade TV show from Spike TV that came out in like the mid 2000s. And that was featured on it as well. And I think that was only like a 5 or 6 episode thing, and they put it all on one disc. And I remember going home, and it was maybe the reason I signed up for Vudu in high school, because it had a Vudu code in it. And it's still like, if I scroll all the way to the bottom of my Vudu, I think it's the first thing on there.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Is the 4-pack of Blade, 3 Blade movies in the TV show. Yeah, so this was like when I was getting into my comic book movie phase of, I don't know, this is probably like 2010, 2011, like right before the Avengers came out, where I was just trying to consume everything Marvel, because I thought it was all connected back then. Turns out it is now, but even back then I was like, well, I got to watch like the Fantastic Four and the Punisher just in case they show up in the Avengers. They haven't yet, but who knows? They might. So yeah, that was my origin story on Blade. And the first time I watched the first Blade, I didn't love it. I liked it. And then I got to Blade 2, and I'm like, this is it. This is my movie. I love this. And then Blade Trinity, I think I've watched once or twice. Yeah. It's bad. It's really bad. Yep. It's bad. It's really bad. I don't want to shit on it. It does have Triple H in it as a vampire, so it has that going for it.
That's right. Oh my God.
Ryan Reynolds and Jessica Biel are in it. Wesley Snipes kind of gave up filming it. But Blade 2 and Blade 1 I think are incredible now. And yeah, Blade 2, I feel like I watch this movie maybe once a year, once every 2 years. I just love putting this one on. It's just one of my favorite comic book movies.
Yeah.
So let's jump into like the origins of this movie. It is written by David S. Goyer, who we have talked about before on the show, Sam. He also wrote the Full Moon film Demonic Toys.
That's right.
The first time we talked about Mr. David Goyer. He would go on to direct Blade Trinity and he co-wrote Dark Knight and Man of Steel and tons of other comic book properties. But he really got his start here, at least in the comic book world, with Blade. And so 1998, the first Blade comes out. It's really Howard the Duck came out before that. I understand that. But it's like the first big Marvel comic book movie. And I think it's so interesting to look at now, like what comic book movies were like even back in 2002 when Blade 2 came out, because that's the first year of Raimi's first Spider-Man.
Yeah.
X-Men had just came out 2 years earlier. DC was not really doing anything because Batman and Robin happened.
DC had just gotten Batman put 6 feet under.
Yeah. So Marvel was kind of like, this is their really starting to ramp up, because once Spider-Man comes out, it was not off to the races, but almost every year a new Marvel movie would be coming out, and now we're at like 7 a year. So that shows the trend of these Marvel movies. I just find it interesting that Guillermo Del Toro was the guy asked to do the sequel to this, and maybe that's
the right guy.
He was 100% the right guy, and that's my next question for you guys. What's your history with Del Toro? Because this was definitely my first Del Toro I watched was Blade 2, and then went back and watched all of his other stuff. I think the only ones that I haven't seen, I think Mimic might be the only one I haven't seen of his. Oh, and Pinocchio. I haven't watched that yet either, but
yeah. I want to see that.
So like the bookends of his career almost. I haven't watched yet. But yeah, I think he's such an interesting director to take on this property. He fits perfect. I'm not saying that as a bad thing. He's one of my favorite directors ever. But looking at even The Devil's Backbone, it does have a dark, super dark fantasy undertone to that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie does too, but also combined with, like you said, Sam, Matrix type action in this. Blade does a suplex to someone at the end of this movie. He's doing kick flips off motorcycles in the beginning. It's I just love Del Toro and his directing style, and I think it does fit perfectly here. And I love how he directs action, especially in these two movies, Blade 2 and Hellboy 2. He has a very unique style, because I can't think of many other directors that direct comic book action better than Del Toro.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
No, I 100% agree. I've been pretty vocal about how I think the Raimi Spider-Man movies have gotten web swinging perfect, and nothing else, even with the leaps and bounds we've made in special effects technology, nothing else has come close to those original Raimi movies.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I feel with Blade. And it's because there's actual fights, there's actual stunt choreography. The camera's actually letting you see the fights instead of just quick cuts and jostling. It's just so rare that you get that anymore. And the way that he so cleanly directs action, I kind of would love to see Del Toro make another comic book movie at some point. I don't know if he'd work within the MCU. I mean, I loved Raimi's Doctor Strange sequel, but there's no denying that it's a little bit at odds with itself at times, trying to be both a Raimi movie and a Marvel movie. But I would still love to just see Del Toro come in and I don't know, try to do something in the landscape as it is now, because I think he could do something really neat. But I'd also want him to do something weird and off the cuff, maybe not like a super mainstream character, like a Hellboy or like a Blade. Blade is mainstream now, but I feel
because of the movies.
Yeah, but I feel like it's because of the movies. But John, you're the comic book expert. Maybe I'm just like...
Yeah, I was actually gonna shine some light on that too from an earlier comment that was made. It's really interesting to me that, like you said, these movies are getting slept on Rotten Tomatoes, and it kind of, first of all, the comic book industry, we all see it. A movie comes out, comic books for that character first appearance go way up. Yesterday you could have gotten it for $3. Now all of a sudden it's a $300 book or whatever, just because of that. And that's the reality of it. When I worked at the comic book store, I saw it all the time. Personally, I don't agree with it. I collect because I'm passionate about the character. And with the Blade books, that is exactly the situation. All of these Blade comics, I own the majority of them now with collecting for Comics by Night. And it was a bit of a challenge to get it because they're lower print runs. So Avengers was hot, X-Men was hot, but these 90s, horror characters that they suddenly started putting out, Blade, your Ghost Riders, all that, it was just lower print runs, especially towards the end of those runs. Blade, gosh, what was it, like 11 or 12 issues or something like that for volume 1. And then the subsequent volumes afterwards were very limited series. So it's really interesting to follow along with that character. I look forward to truly reading all of it. I have not read it yet, but I've collected probably about 95% of the books now, nice. Which is all of this mess behind me. So it's definitely a process. And the other thing too with Blade is Blade's history with Marvel is not just with the comic books, but also appearances in magazines that they did at the time too. So he'll have little appearances here and there in the Vampire Tales, things like that. I've collected some of that, but that is a realm, a different level of Marvel darkness that I'm still dipping my feet into. So I would consider myself a mid-priest of the dark arts of comic books. But yes, it looks and feels like, even if it's a comic book or a movie, that it does kind of get that C+ treatment from the overall public until there's a key moment, right? And so when Blade 1 hits theaters, at the time, people were like, holy crap, this is awesome, Blade 2, same thing. When this new Blade project comes out, there's going to be a revival of not just the books, but the previous movies as well.
Oh, yeah.
And that's just the way it goes. You're going to see streaming numbers through the roof if you guys monitor those. Or purchasing, or whatever. However, people are getting their films these days. Yar. But same thing with comics, and toys and all that stuff too. So I personally I've learned as a collector of comics to, if you're at all interested in it, go for it. Things like a Venom comic book, they might not be the best, but Venom is actually one where it goes very quickly and then it's hard to find. So if you try to jump into the same run later, you're going to pay probably 2x what you would have if you would have just gotten it from the get-go. You never really see them on the dollar wall. And so it's just really interesting to see how the public receives darker stuff like this. And I've only seen it mainly with like horror characters, and then maybe some like anti-hero kind of things, but sometimes those stories are the best, which is why I do the show that I do. So and I suspect it's probably the same for movies too. I'll be curious to see though how things look coming up when that new Blade project drops. But I agree with both of you. I think that these films, at least 1 and 2, have their own legs to stand on.
Yeah, I want to jump into the characters of this movie, and John, I'm going to ask for your guidance on if they are comic book characters at all, because I did a little looking up, especially for the villain of this movie. There's a little piece of trivia I thought that was interesting on it. But we have Wesley Snipes. He plays Blade, obviously. Chris Christopherson comes back as Whistler. Our boy Ron Perlman. This is also a Ron Perlman double feature. He plays he kind of plays the main antagonist of this movie, Reinhardt. I'm gonna mispronounce her name. I do apologize. Lenore Varela plays Nisa. Norman Reedus from Walking Dead fame plays Scud. He should have been named Scud in every movie and TV show Norman Reedus has ever appeared in. If there was any person that embodied the name of Scud, it's Norman Reedus.
Yep. Oh man, like he says his name in this movie, and I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what you're called. Like, that's exactly what everybody calls you. There's no No doubt in my mind.
And then there's Luke Goss, who plays Nomak, the one of the main antagonists besides Ron Perlman's, the one that everybody's going after. He's the vampire hybrid. He's also the villain in Hellboy 2, so we'll talk about him in Hellboy 2.
Mm-hmm. Also, did you guys notice that Vince from The Fast and the Furious is essentially just playing vampire Vince in Blade 2?
I like to think these worlds are connected.
Yeah, like because he's still the guy that's just like not quite sure about the new guy, and he's got his suspicions. And
listen, a year before we saw him disappear at the end of the first Fast and the Furious, and we didn't see him again for another like 10 years.
Yep.
Yeah, because he pops up in Fast 5, and then doesn't he die?
He dies in Fast 5, but in between those two, he becomes a vampire.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Seems that works.
And then Donnie Yen also plays one of the vampires in this as well. I don't think he has any lines in this. He was also a stunt coordinator on the movie, so I think that's his connection. It was just nice to see Donnie Yen pop up.
It was. I got so excited when I saw him, and then I realized, like, as the movie progressed, I'm like, oh, he's just gonna be background. Like, he's just here for a couple of cool fight sequences, and that's it. Which, it's Donnie Yen, like, he got his paycheck and he looks cool as fuck doing what he's doing. Yeah. So
that's what I gotta say. So this movie is so 2002 in the best way possible.
Yeah.
And I love every second of it. Everything feels so vibrant and lively but it's also like a very dark movie, and it keeps that dark palette throughout the entire movie, but it also fills that comic book vibe that you're wanting out of a Blade movie, even more so I think than the first movie. I think the first movie has a pretty serious, like, just vampire action movie tone, whereas this one goes straight up into comic book territory, where it's like Blade has to fight an uber vampire, the Reaper vampire, that's like a hybrid where even vampires are scared of this vampire because it's going after them and changing them into Reapers. And so he has to team up with what's the name of this group? Ron Perlman's group. It has a badass name.
Oh what are they called?
It's like the blood something. I'll let you look that up, Sam. But it's led by Ron Perlman's Reinhardt, who he's a racist. I mean, they were the Blood Pack. Yeah. Such a great like comic book name. And he is awful in this movie, Ron Perlman. He's such a bastard, and I love it. He's so good at playing a bastard. He's so good in this movie. The banter between Wesley Snipes and Ron Perlman in this movie is incredible. From the "tell me, do you blush" line, it's like, oh, I hate this guy already. I hope he dies. He definitely does by the end of this. Apparently, that was a line Wesley Snipes requested for this movie too. Wesley Snipes has he has a lot of creative control when it comes to the Blade movies, and that was a line he requested because someone told it to him one time, and he's like, "That's a bastard line. Let's give it to our most bastard character, Ron Perlman."
Ron Perlman, who spends most of this movie with a tiny explosive device strapped to the back of his head.
Yep.
And that's the only reason he's not even more of a bastard.
Yeah. What I love is that this movie has such great setup and payoffs throughout it. Because there's a vampire in the opening of this where Blade is just going after a bunch of vampires to get to Christopherson, to Whistler, who was turned. Well, he died in the first movie.
He dies in the first movie, and then they retcon it because they're like, well, we can get Chris Christopherson, so why don't we bring him back?
I don't love it, but I don't hate it because it's so well done.
I mean, here's the thing. It's like a blink and you miss it. Like, they turned him into a vampire, but then for some reason, like, Blade's able to just cure him. And I'm like, if you can cure him, why can't you cure other vampires? And I was like, I'm not even going to get into that. Whistler's back. Who cares? Let's go kick some ass.
He wasn't sure he was gonna come back. He's like, the sun comes up, that door opens. Either you're turned or not.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But like the movie opens with him like kicking ass against all these other vampires, and he lets one guy go and says something along the lines of like, "I'll see you later," or "You'll see me around," something like that.
Yep.
And that's the bookend of the entire movie with that random guy. He sees him later in the vampire nightclub, and the guy just runs away because he sees Blade. It's such a great like setup payoff for this movie. Same with when Ron Perlman's introduced. We get the bomb in the back of his head, and we get the setup of like, we hate this guy, he's a bastard. We get the "tell me do you blush" line. Blade pays that off by the end of the movie, right back at him when he, spoiler alert for Blade 2, where he just slices him up the middle.
Yeah, just totally bisects him.
Yep.
Oh, it's gnarly.
And maybe that may be the best piece of CGI in this movie.
Yeah, I agree with that,
because there's not a lot of great CGI in this.
But the thing is like, I feel like the CG in this is at least better than the CG in the first one.
Yes.
In comparison, there's miles of difference. But the thing that I think works for this movie is most of the time I feel like the CG is used to enhance what's already being done in camera. You know, like little details and added textures on the Reaper design, things like that. Because like when the Reapers come out and their mouths start to unfold and they've got all these tendrils and crap, like that stuff looks incredible throughout this whole movie. The Reaper design is just it's
the best. It's
cool. It's insane. It's insane.
I really quick before we leave the Blood Pack behind here, I just wanted to give them another call out because that, you know, we keep comparing this to borderline Matrixy, but this whole team, just, I was giggling so hard. Like, what's your name? I am Lighthammer, the muscle, the token muscle of the group. And then a gal, of course, you know, someone always has to ride on his shoulder or whatever. And then Priest with his shades and long hair. And I'm like, dude, okay, where's Trinity at? Let's have the phone ring. Let's, you know, like, what's going on here? It just it made me giggle a little bit, but the names and everything. I know this was early 2000s. Boy, I felt like I was 97, 98.
Yeah.
With some of that.
It does.
Especially with comics. It's that classic team build. You have the big one, you have the snarky guy, you have the swordsman, you have the leader, you know. It's just so funny. Also with the Blood Pack, upon you know, because I told you, I kind of tuned into some videos to kind of check out this movie from different perspectives, and when this team came up, it made me think of a recent book that came out, and this is actually definitely canon in Marvel. There was a team of vampires called the Unforgiven who drink only animal blood, and so they don't consume human blood, and they recently did like an arc where they intersected with Spider-Man, Captain America, the X-Men, but they actually appeared, it was a few years ago, in an event called Fear Itself, where Hulk went up against Dracula, or something like that, you know, and they were in there, so that was their first appearance too. So it just made me think about that, and I'm like, I bet you we're going to be seeing some more vampire craziness coming up for sure. Yep.
God, I hope so. I hope they dive into that corner of those comics in this upcoming Blade stuff, because like they can now. It's Marvel. People are going to show up regardless, you know.
They already did a werewolf TV show, like
exactly.
TV special, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Like if you can do a black and white werewolf special that does not lose a single member of your core audience, because people love that one. Like, you can do anything. So I fully expect them to go crazy with Blade, and I'll be very disappointed if they don't.
Fingers
like
crossed.
Yeah.
Are any of these characters comic book characters, John? Do you know?
So for all the characters that you were naming, the Blood Pack, all that stuff, I just need to provide full disclosure. I have not read a lick of Blade yet, because I'm reading my stuff in order of release date. So I'm still in the 60s right now. So I honestly have not read from my limited exposure of Blade, I can't say that I've met these characters necessarily in comics, but that also means a lot of my Blade right now is just cameos and other titles I was collecting earlier on. So it would just have been Blade mainly.
From the limited stuff I know, from very limited stuff I've read on Blade, Whistler is a character in the comics. I don't know about any of these other people. I would highly doubt it, especially in 2002, that they would pull like every side character from the comics. I would assume they would just make it up for the movie.
Yeah.
One of the interesting notes that I did look up of a pretty popular comic book character that was supposed to appear in this movie. He was supposed to be the main bad guy of this movie. He was, instead of a Reaper, it was going to be Morbius.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah, but Sony, I believe, still had the rights, obviously, to the character, and was like, no, we're going to do our own thing.
And boy, did they.
20 years later, they did.
Oof.
Oh, man. Can you imagine? That would have been gnarly.
It would have been. You need still, in 2002, you still could have cast Jared Leto, and it would have made sense.
Oh, that would have been interesting. Yeah, because his transformation's different. He's not like bitten by Dracula, so that's cool.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, and I know the Blade Trinity pulls. I think most of those characters are from the comics. At least Ryan Reynolds and Jessica Biel, and Dracula. Bald, beefy Dracula in that movie pulled directly from the comic books. Yeah. But Blade 2, back to this movie. What's some of your guys' highlights or favorite moments of Blade 2? What's your favorite scenes that stick out to you?
On my side, I personally loved the team reveal only because I was giggling so hard. So again, it gave me the Matrix vibes, and it was just crazy, just that 90s goodness. I always, every time I see that scene, I just feel like I'm 10 years younger. It's very magical. But I gotta say, I mirror your sentiments about the Reaper reveals, and I gotta say that I loved every scene that the Reapers were in. I love the fact that they instilled fear in vampires, which instilled fear in everybody else around them. And so that was a really cool concept. And where we were at as a society and where we were at with our media consumption, we weren't as desensitized as we are now to a lot of these concepts. And so back then, holy crap, this is a big deal. The vampire nation is shaking in their boots, And so it was, I thought it was a movie that was definitely needed for its time, but maybe ahead of its time too, in some great ways. It really pushed you to think, like, what could be worse than vampires? Ta-da! There it is. And so I appreciated that. And then I will say that I really just the fight scene when they came into the warehouse, the two ninja vampires deliver the message.
The one
I know there was a lot of CGI and lighting and stuff like that, but overall, that was pretty darn entertaining.
Yep. I love the fight between Blade and Nyssa in front of like that giant wall of lights. The way that's choreographed and performed is so great. I think the entire sewer sequence where they're down there, they're planting the bombs. That is just, it's so tense. It's so thrilling. They're genuinely just some like terrifying visuals where all the Reapers are like crawling down the tunnel towards people, and it's just like, oh god, you see them just lurking in the background, and everything about that sequence, right down to the like twists and turns, which team members are going to turn on each other. Oh god, these people are turning on Blade, how's he going to get the upper hand? Yeah, that whole sequence is just, it's one of the best I'd say it's in the third act, at least. It's like the first part of the third act, and it's one of the best third act sequences in a comic book movie I can think of. Because there's genuine stakes. The whole thing is just pulled off so stylishly in a way that only Del Toro can really do. And Yeah.
Did you say that it had genuine stakes because it's a vampire film?
I did not, but I can't not make. I even have to subconsciously make terrible puns.
There you go.
So
Hey, I don't think there are any stakes that way in this movie.
Ooh.
No, there aren't.
That's actually probably very true. Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
They use the sunlight because the shooting the Reapers doesn't
Ah, yeah, the autopsy sequence
Oof,
where they're
yeah.
pulling apart the Reaper and there's the bone encrusted around the heart, and it's just those practical effects are so gnarly. I love it.
This movie has such great. I'll get to my favorite point, my favorite moment in a second, because it takes place in that sewer scene too. But the world building that this movie does is incredible. The first movie does a great job too. I'm not putting that down at all, because I think the first Blade sets up this world perfectly that we get to expand in Blade 2 on, especially with the Reapers of like we've talked about, where the vampires are terrified of them, and if they're terrified of them, humans should really be terrified. And this feels like a very early 2000s like underworld Resident Evil type of thing. Like this movie has tons of those type of vibes in it, and Del Toro does such a great job of world building in this movie. That autopsy scene of like understanding vampire DNA, like you just don't get that in a lot of vampire movies or even monster movies, of like, let's figure out what makes this monster and how we can use that to defeat it. It's such a great sequence. But my favorite scene of this movie is in the sewer scene, and it's one of my favorite action movie lines ever, and it's so perfectly delivered by Wesley Snipes. It makes Blade the biggest badass in the entire world. It's when just tons of Reapers are coming up on him, like, I don't know, dozens of them, and he pulls out one of the bombs and he just yells, "You obviously have no idea who you are fucking with," and throws it down and they all explode. It's peak cinema for me. It is one of my favorite scenes in any movie ever. It's one of my favorite action movie lines. You understand everything you need to know about the Blade character with that one line too, of like, this guy has no fear. He's going to destroy every vampire that comes up against him. And why don't these vampires know who he is? Because he's Blade. He's the Daywalker. He's their vampire. It's so good.
That's awesome. Oh, man.
Going back to your world building comment too, I love the different ways that vampires consume blood in this movie. Like, they're snorting blood crystals like cocaine. One of them's literally eating a block of gelatinized like blood. It's just a jello mold, and he's just like eating it with a fork. Like, it's so gross and so weird. And like, I guess I also have not read any of the Blade comics, but I can't imagine that those things, the blood crystals, the gelatin, like, that has to be a Del Toro thing. That has to be a Del Toro thing, because it's such a weird thing to put in a vampire movie. Like, I would have never thought to, like, oh yeah, make blood into jello and have your like big bad just be lounging in a bathrobe eating it. Like, what? That's so just, it's weird, it's gross. It made my skin crawl. There's something about like seeing blood not runny that's like, ew, you know?
Yeah, they have a ton of fun with their blood in this. Like,
I can.
There's Ken cameo. They have a ton of fun with blood in this movie, and my favorite visual is at the end where, like, Blade is down and out. He's done for. Whistler comes to save him, and basically Blade just falls into this giant waterfall fountain of blood and rises out of it like he's in Apocalypse Now. Like, it's incredible. I love.
And he's
that
juiced like the blood had steroids in it.
Yeah. Like Wesley just was pumping a bunch of iron before they shot that scene. He's like, I got to get jacked for this one.
Yeah.
So good.
God, it's great.
And then right after he kills Ron Perlman's character Reinhardt, and Whistler throws his sunglasses to him, and he just catches him in the air and puts them on. It's the best. I love it so much.
It's so late 90s, early 2000s.
It is.
Right on down to the soundtrack, which is just like all techno and like new metal. And
Yes.
They don't make them like this anymore, and it's unfortunate.
I just to your point though, his portrayal of the character though, from what I've read of Blade so far, chef's kiss. And if we go ahead with this new project, if it happens with all the pushbacks the MCU is experiencing, the upcoming actor, if he's still on the project at that point, has some very big shoes to fill, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like Wesley Snipes is almost it's almost a Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man level casting, where it's just like, man, and I mean, Mahershala Ali is like a multi-time Oscar winner. He's a great actor. He's been in a Marvel series before. He was incredible as Cottonmouth in Luke Cage for Netflix. But I'm also like, man, how do you follow up Wesley Snipes as Blade?
Yeah.
Like,
I want to see him back. Like, after watching this, that's all I could think about was why aren't
Blade, No Way Home?
Yeah, why aren't we just bringing Wesley Snipes back?
Yeah.
I would not be mad about that.
I wouldn't be mad about that either.
Also, I want Wesley Snipes in John Wick 5 if that movie happens, just because I feel watching Donnie Yen in this, I was like, Donnie Yen is so good in John Wick 4. I want Wesley Snipes now in John Wick 5. Anyway.
Oh, I love that tax evader.
Hey, can't.
I mean, look, if you're gonna go to jail for a crime, tax evasion is like one of the coolest crimes you can go to jail for.
He is Wesley Snipes after all. He's Blade.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap up this conversation. Blade 2, do you guys have any final thoughts? And how many lines of vampire blood cocaine would you give this movie?
Oh.
This is a solid 4 out of 5 cocaine bloodlines.
Mm-hmm.
Just your expression when you said it. For those of you listening audio-wise, you gotta watch the replay. Oh my goodness. I'm with Sam on that, only because I would give all 5, but I gotta experience that, I guess, because I've never heard of such a thing for cocaine bloodline. So I'll give it a 4 out of 5 as well.
I'm gonna give mine a 4.5. I'm stopping halfway through that last one. I just can't do it. What happens is the light from that fight scene hits me in the face and blinds me from finishing it. I don't love that scene like you guys did. I think that's the 1.5 star I give it, where I like the fight choreography, but I can clearly tell that those are just 2 poorly rendered computer characters fighting.
Yeah.
Tomato.
I like the fight. I like the actual fight. I just wish the CGI was better.
Yeah. It's still better than most of the CGI we get.
It is.
I mean, I can't name a single. No, okay, I can. I was about to say I can't name a single Phase 4 movie that has better CG. But then Guardians of the Galaxy 3 exists, and that movie actually rules. So I can't write off Phase 4 altogether.
Most of it, absolutely, but Guardians was amazing.
Yes. Yep.
All the feels.
Absolutely.
Moving on to our next phase, we are talking Hellboy 2: The Golden Army. Sam, I'm just gonna give this one to you. Tell us about Hellboy 2: The Golden Army.
Let's take this back to 2008. Oof. I was a teenage kid on the cusp of manhood, fully getting into superhero cinema at that time, and a little movie came out called The Dark Knight. And I went and I saw that 4 times in the movie theater.
Boom.
I loved that movie. It was my entire identity for like 2 years, like most young men my age. I had like 3 different posters of Heath Ledger's Joker on my bedroom wall. No joke. Then, something weird happened. I turned 18 and I bought Hellboy 2 on Blu-ray at one point, and I put that movie in, and I thought, why have I never heard of this movie? And I actually saw Hellboy 2 before I saw Hellboy 1. I will forever be upset with Christopher Nolan and The Dark Knight from here on forward, because what happened is both of these movies came out in 2008, and The Dark Knight dominated the conversation all the way to the Oscars. I don't get that. I'm sorry. I love that movie. I don't get that. Whatever. This was a terrible idea to just let me fly off the handle about.
I was going to say, anyway, we're not talking about the cinematic masterpiece, The Dark Knight, one of the greatest comic book
but
movies
we kind of have to talk about it a little bit, because here's the thing, and I will pose the question later, but that movie tanked Hellboy 3. And after watching Hellboy 2, there is not a chance in hell that I would not have liked Guillermo Del Toro's Hellboy 3 more than I liked The Dark Knight Rises, the eventual conclusion to the Dark Knight trilogy. I say all this to say I love Hellboy 2. It is one of my favorite comic book movies of all time, hands down. And I think it is a criminally underrated masterpiece that is only criminally underrated because of the unfortunate time period in which it came out. Hellboy 2 rules. Anyways, that was my ADHD rant. Sorry.
I feel like I saw like an ad like you're running for president or something right now. Like you with the American flag behind you.
Make America Hellboy again.
Yeah. This is the hill that I will die on. Hellboy 2 is a better movie than The Dark Knight. Yeah. That's where I'm at.
So I don't agree with that. I watched this movie for the first time ever in prep for this episode because of Sam yelling at me, telling me how much The Dark Knight sucks and this movie rules. And I liked it. I like Hellboy 2. I've only seen the first Hellboy once, and that was a couple years ago. I'm late to the Hellboy game. It was one of the later Del Toros I watched even. And I liked the first one, and I like this one probably about the same. And I don't think it's like one of the great comic book movies of all time, but I do think it is one of the most underrated comic book movies of all time, because in 2008 we're coming, like, that's the transitional year for comic book movies, right?
Yep.
Like Iron Man comes out, kicks off the MCU, Dark Knight comes out, Oscar buzz, and Oscar wins for that movie, and kind of two different paths go from those two releases. And then you have Hellboy 2 just kind of still sitting there in 2008, and nothing happened afterwards, which is unfortunate, because I do think it's a really fun comic book movie. I think again, talking about world building, I think Blade 2 and this and Hellboy 2 have so much in common in terms of building a world, setting up a villain that has family history, that we explore that family history and why they're kind of ousted from their own family. There's so many similarities.
Yeah. Isn't it crazy?
It is. The same actor plays the villain in both movies. That's how close it gets. Yeah.
Now, here's my question for you. I know that you saw Blade 2 first, obviously. Like for me, I think that Blade 2 is like a very obvious precursor to Hellboy 2. But I think Hellboy 2 nails what Blade 2 is maybe a little too action focused to land its the oh god, how am I gonna say this? I think Hellboy 2 does what Blade 2 is trying to do thematically better because Blade 2 is more focused on badass action, whereas Hellboy is definitely more character driven, in my opinion. Would you agree kind of with that? Ish?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And the similarities are very close until you get to the main character.
Yeah.
Whereas Blade is 100% a loner that just so happens to have like tech guys with him helping him. Whereas Hellboy he's part of a big government organization. He has Abe Sapien as like his sidekick. He has a love interest. Abe Sapien has a love interest.
He's got cats.
He has cats. He loves watching Universal monster movies. He's exactly like us. And Hellboy 2 has so much focus on the characters and their relationships, where Blade 2 doesn't really focus on that. Like we kind of joked about, hey, they killed Whistler off in the last movie and then just sort of resurrected him in the sequel. They never explore that relationship too much further than the opening of this movie and saving Whistler. It's just, okay, now Whistler's back full time and everything's okay between these two.
Yeah.
And whereas Hellboy 2, let's say like Abe Sapien died in the first movie and Hellboy had to go and resurrect him somehow, there would be this back and forth relationship. Abe Sapien would probably have like an existential crisis of being dead and coming back to life, whereas, like we said, Whistler just, all right, everything's normal, back to the status quo. John, what about you? What's your history with Mr. Hellboy?
With Mr. Hellboy, so I'm definitely more so on between the two of you. I'd lean more towards Casey in that I still consider myself pretty new to the whole thing. I have not read any of the comic books, first of all, so that kind of made my opinion of it when it came out, because I saw these both in theater, at least 1 and 2, and I unfortunately wasn't as excited about those films as I was about like a Blade or any Marvel movie, only because I hadn't read it, right? And when I go to a movie like that, knowing that it's based on a comic, I kind of put my blinders on, and I'm not like, is it a good movie? But instead, what does this mean to me as a comic book reader? It's really weird, but my perspective at that time kind of crippled my experience with it. When I was watching, like I said, just kind of some review videos, highlight videos and stuff to kind of brush up on this film, I definitely, there were some notes in there that made me giggle a lot, that we'll talk about as we talk about the plot. It is a lot more touchy-feely, I guess, whereas Blade is more of a throw it and kill it kind of thing. I don't know. So maybe that's more my vibe, I guess. I don't know. But I think that for me, just having no exposure to the character at all, kind of limited my appreciation of it a little bit. Was it a bad movie? No, certainly not. But at the time when I first saw it, I was not like, blown away by it, unfortunately. And Sam, I'm not saying that to offend you.
No,
this was me like when it came out. And now even I would probably give him a go, though. I mean, this is coming from the guy that just watched the Harry Potter movies like a month ago. Never saw him before. Yeah.
Oh shit.
Yeah. So yeah, you know what I mean? It's just,
John, you're doing better than me there. I've only ever seen the first 2 Harry Potter.
so don't, this is just my opinion, and there's all sorts of people out there that haven't seen it yet or have and love it. So yeah, but I respect it. But yeah, there are some funny moments in this one.
Yeah. So I don't have an extensive knowledge of the Hellboy comics by any means. Like I've read pieces here and there, like a few trade paperbacks, a couple of comic runs that I've picked up over the years. But it's not like I have this like encyclopedic knowledge of the history of all the comics or anything. But I do love the character of Hellboy. I love Abe Sapien. I just kind of love the BPRD. Like, I just think that organization and the world within that organization is super cool. And Del Toro just handles it in such a way where, like, this, to me, the Golden Army stops being a superhero movie or a horror movie and just kind of is a fantasy movie in and of itself. Which is weird because I'm not typically drawn to fantasy, but the way this is rendered, the way this is crafted, the standout set piece to me is the one in the middle of the film with the jumping bead. Yeah, the jumping bean that turns into the giant elemental. And there's that back and forth between Hellboy and Prince Nuada about, this is like, humans will turn on you. This is the last of its kind. If you kill it, no one will ever see anything like this again. While you've got, his superiors down screaming for him to shoot it. And just that internal conflict with both him and then with Liz, where especially in the end where, she's literally choosing between the eventual end of the world and Hellboy, the man she loves. It's just, there's so much thematically that I love about this. Everything with Abe Sapien and the princess is just it is done so well. And honestly, my actual favorite scene in the whole movie is it's not an action scene. It's not anything. It is when Hellboy is drunk, wandering around after hours, and he comes across Abe listening to his cheesy love song. And they just start cracking beers and singing together and just bonding. And it's just, we do not get moments like that in superhero or comic book movies anymore. We just don't. And it's funny, it's heartwarming, and it's not just there to be there. It moves the plot forward. It lets you know more things about the characters, and it gets interrupted by our villain, and our heroes are too inebriated to do anything about it. Mm-hmm. And it leads to me, that right there, I'm like, we don't have moments, we don't have sequences like that in these movies anymore.
I would say the only person that does those anymore is James Gunn.
Right. Which is probably why I've absolutely adored everything he's done, despite being largely pretty tired of comic book movies recently. And I say that as guys, the first 3 phases of Marvel, I was at every single one of those movies opening weekend in the theater. I could not get enough of them. And I don't even think I've seen the last 3 Marvel movies.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think a lot of people are now too. And again, it goes down to, why did we love those first 3 phases? Mm-hmm. It's because you love the characters. Why do we love Hellboy? It's because you love the Hellboy character. You love Liz. You love Abe Sapien. You love the characters. Yep. And I think this, like you said, Sam, that's the best thing this movie does for me is the characters, where you feel for all of them. You understand all of their relationships to each other. It allows the movie to slow down and have those intimate moments of, like you said, where they're listening to the record together while they're getting drunk. And then when they go and they're still plastered, go and like stand over Liz's bed, and Hellboy just talks about like she's his entire world.
I would do anything for, or I would, what does he say? He's like, I would give my life, my entire world for her, but she wants me to do the dishes.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it goes directly into, oh no, the bad guy's here. We need to go into an action scene, but our heroes are too drunk to actually fight it.
Yeah.
And it leads it directly into the third act, where Hellboy has like this shard of metal, this piece of the villain's spear, like inching its way towards his heart to kill him. And if they try to remove it, it goes closer to it.
Mm-hmm. And you get another Doug Jones performance as the Angel of Death, mm-hmm. which Oh my God, that creature design is so good.
That was
Like,
nice.
oh, this movie, guys, I love it. The Angel of Death sequence is just it's unrivaled. It plays a little bit like the Pale Man from his like Pan's Labyrinth. It's got flavors of that scene, but I love it.
This movie leans very heavily into the dark fantasy side of Del Toro.
Yeah.
Which,
oh, for sure.
Del Toro is he's such an interesting director where he can do he definitely sticks within genre for everything he does. Where you can have something like The Devil's Backbone, which is like a ghost story. You have Blade 2, which is a straight up like R-rated comic book action movie. Then you have Pan's Labyrinth, that's like a dark, twisted fantasy, child's fantasy. Hellboy 2 kind of combines all of that stuff into one. Yeah. And then he makes like Pacific Rim and makes Oscar-winning movies now with like Shape of Water. Like Del Toro is one of the most versatile directors that can make almost anything, but you still know it's Del Toro every single time you watch it. And it's not just because of the style of the movie, it's because of how he uses all the elements of the movie, if that makes sense. It's not like a Wes Anderson where it's like visually, you know that style, that's Wes Anderson. Del Toro, it's like, oh no, you gotta like how the characters are presented, how the world is built, what themes and what elements he puts into it in terms of like fantasy or horror or sci-fi. You can just tell it's a Del Toro movie, and through Hellboy 2 is especially that. So like that elemental scene of the little bean that like grows into a giant monster. I don't know how you watch that and you're not like, let's give this guy a Cthulhu movie that he wants to make, because that's exactly what that is. But put into a Hellboy movie. That's my favorite. I think that's my favorite scene in this movie is that, because it feels so fantastical. It feels very superhero. There's a point where Hellboy is saving a baby, which him and Blade both had that in common, where they both save babies in their movies. Except Hellboy doesn't give a coochie coo to this baby like Blade does in Blade Trinity. But that entire sequence feels like it's ripped straight from like the Raimi trilogy.
Yeah.
Like
it's very reminiscent of those. Yep. Yeah.
And there's a shot where like Hellboy's on one of the neon signs holding the baby looking up at the monster. I'm like, that feels like a very Spider-Man image to me. And me as
the
a Spider-Man
back and forth between him and Nuada, like that feels so much to me like the scene in the first Spider-Man where Willem Dafoe's Goblin is like telling Peter Parker, like, these humans, like these people are going to turn on you. Mm-hmm. Like, why are you so obsessed with saving them? And it deals with a lot of those same thematics. To me, like this was the last gasp of this era of superhero filmmaking. Like this was the big finish. I know you have thematic elements in some of the Marvel movies, and those are the ones that I enjoy the most. But it does feel like post this, and maybe it's like the boom of CG and how quickly that technology advanced. It feels like these big blockbusters stopped focusing so much on character as much as like, what can we do visually that's going to be super cool? What can we do to wow people with a spectacular action scene? And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, you can still make a very good movie with that. I'd argue that Blade 2 is a very good example of, we don't really have much character, but like, wow, look at all the cool stuff that we've put in this movie. I just think that Hellboy 2 is the last in an era that didn't forget that you had to still have an emotional through line in all of these. This is a movie that gets me teared up at multiple points. Like, the first two Spider-Man movies are movies that get me teared up. Even like parts of the X-Men Particularly like X2 has some real like emotional wallop to it in certain aspects. And I don't know. Maybe I'm just like way too nostalgic for this era, and I'm putting blinders on to the other stuff that was coming out that very much was not like this. Because like, yes, I still love things like the Nick Cage Ghost Rider and stuff, and I'm not going to make any arguments that those are great cinema.
Yeah, I was going to say the Fantastic Four movies came out in the same era.
I love the Fantastic Four movies with Chris Evans, but I'm also like, they're not great. They're not great.
But I think you're correct. I think that's what makes some of these timeless. Like the Raimi, at least the first two Raimis especially, stand out as like, these are timeless comic book movies. That I would throw in Hellboy 2 goes into that same category. Guardians of the Galaxy falls in there, the Captain America movies. I think that's what really makes them stand out. And I'm not throwing in the DC movies because the Dark Knight movies feel different than the rest of those comic book movies just because of how grounded and realistic those are. But I think what's missing today in today's comic book movies, and that Hellboy 2 has, is the finale of this movie is the world's at stake in multiple ways. Of either the Golden Army is just going to come take over and all humans are going to die, or like we talked about the scene with the Dark Angel, correct?
The Angel of Death. Yeah,
Angel of Death, where the Angel of Death says Hellboy is going to destroy the world. Do you want to keep him alive or risk that happening? And again, it's like the world's going to end one way or the other by the end of this movie. But how does this movie end? It ends in like a weird gear it's not a factory, but it's like it's just gears everywhere. And it's so small scale. It's Hellboy and Ape
challenging him for the crown
and fighting one guy for the crown with these giant like gear monsters.
Yeah,
and it's so small scale. No buildings are getting destroyed. No aliens are coming from outer space to topple New York City. It's just this one small moment between characters happening, and I think that's something that's really been missing in comic book movies nowadays, where it's everything has to be the Avengers. It's like, no, let's just have our characters fighting that inner struggle while also fighting the outer struggle of a villain who's causing that inner turmoil. And I think Hellboy 2 does it.
Spider-Man not team up with Iron Man every movie.
Yeah.
You know what needs to happen though, and if it did happen, I would not have these notions. Is let's put Ted and Werewolf by Night in some things, and I'll be really happy with that.
Yeah.
Like Avengers with Werewolf by Night. Yes.
That's that show is a great example, or whatever you want to call it. That Marvel special is a great example of like small stakes, big characters.
Yep.
Of like it just takes place in that mansion, and that's
Here
it. There's no like
again.
Yeah, the world's not going to end. There might be actual like wooden stakes in that one, but again, it's just a very small scale story with big characters inside of it, and I think that's what makes some of the great comic book movies stand out. Like Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy ends with Peter Parker is fighting the Green Goblin in the first movie, like in some like broken down building with brick collapsing and no one else is around. That's how that movie ends. It's not like the world's gonna end. It's a small fight between the two characters. And Hellboy 2
still one of the best third acts in comic book movie history.
It is. Hellboy and Hellboy 2's third act is incredible as well. I don't love the giant the Golden Army monsters. I don't love them. They're one of my
I do.
I think the set, the use of the gears in the fight is just top notch. I loved it so much. I could have done without the monsters. And that's just because I know what Del Toro can do with monsters and the visuals of it. Even the opening of this movie where is it stop motion or
it's stop motion? I was actually going to bring that up because yes, there's a whole intro to this movie narrated by John Hurt coming back as the professor. doing like essentially telling a young Hellboy the story of the Golden Army, and it's all told through like claymation and shadow puppetry, and I love that opening sequence. I think it's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's so cool.
I know. Also, I was starting to watch it, and Kayla was getting ready to leave, and she's like, "What are you watching?" I was like, "Hellboy 2." It was during that sequence, and she's like, "I'm gonna have to come back and watch this."
Oh, I feel like
It's
Kayla
incredible.
would love this movie. Yeah, yeah.
And again, feels very Del Toro, that opening.
Yeah.
Like no one else is gonna direct a movie like that or a flashback sequence. Even Peter Jackson, like it reminded me a lot of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Peter Jackson just directs that as like live action. It's part of this world. Del Toro, on the other hand, like you said, uses different forms of animation to tell this story.
Yep. It's a fairy tale that then by the end of the movie is set firmly within the movie's world. And I just love that.
One thing I was giggling about with this film too, and I'm hoping sincerely that this is Hellboy 2, but the shower scene where he was like in the shower and it was just like red muscles, and I'm like, this is so over the top, but I'm kind of here for it. I don't know. So I'm hoping that was 2. I'm thinking that it was, but it's like he was in the bureau's like locker room area.
Yes.
Just grabbing a quick shower. It was the funniest thing ever because it just shows the casual side along with the beer scene of what it means to be a superhero or an operative, I guess.
Yep.
I think that day-to-day monotonous things like that were always dodged in comics because readers evidently don't care about that. But it just, I don't know, to me, I always find those mechanics kind of helpful, so that way you can relate more. My biggest complaint with the Superman, you don't identify with them.
Yep. Exactly.
Really,
exactly.
I didn't identify with him until he snapped some dude's neck, and I'm like, I get it.
But for that, you just gotta watch Brightburn or whatever, though.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh God, the shower scene with the beer too. That brings me to another thing. Like, I feel like we have to talk about how Seth MacFarlane is in this movie.
Oh yeah,
as Dr. Krauss, the like ghost vapors that are just in the suit essentially. And the whole fight sequence in the locker room between the two of them is so funny, where he keeps needling Hellboy until Hellboy punches the glass and the vapor all pours out and the suit just like falls down to the ground, and Hellboy thinks he's killed Dr. Krauss, only for Krauss to come through the lockers and start like hitting him in the face and the back and everything. And yeah, his beer goes everywhere. And then you just have that really goofy visual of Dr. Krauss's like corporeal form running away while you have Seth MacFarlane's maniacal giggling playing over it. And okay, another voice performance. I'm so glad that Doug Jones actually voices Abe Sapien in this. In the first Hellboy, David Hyde Pierce is the voice of Abe Sapien. Doug Jones just did the physical performance because the studio felt they needed a name like David Hyde Pierce to help get people in seats. The issue was
big box office draw, David Hyde Pierce.
I mean, this is coming off of Frasier, so I kind of get it because he's huge in Frasier at this time. But the funny thing is, David Hyde Pierce was like, no, this is Doug Jones's role. Like, he made Abe what he is. So he decided that he didn't want to be credited. He didn't show up to the premiere. He didn't do any promotion. So like no one even knew David Hyde Pierce was in the movie anyways.
I didn't know that until I looked it up for this movie. I just assumed Doug Jones was always every part of Abe Sapien. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's something that, I mean, honestly, that's part of what puts this one, because I love both of these movies, but that's what puts Hellboy 2, among other things, above the first one for me, is I like that Doug Jones has full control of the Abe Sapien character, and I love what he does with it. Like, Abe Sapien is incredible in this. His whole thing with and you know it's gonna pay off when he's talking to Hellboy, and it gets me choked up just thinking about it. But his whole, I don't even think I have tear ducts, I can't cry. And then later on, as I mean, spoilers for Hellboy 2, it's been out since 2008, folks. When Princess Nuala sacrifices herself to stop her brother and shut down the Golden Army, like there's just the shot of like Abe holding her and just the single tear falling from it. And I'm like, God, I get like it's the whole Raimi Spider-Man thing where I could see people being like, oh, it's cheesy, but I'm like, it's effective. Like it's heartfelt. It's it's not this like snarky, passive aggressive, I'm an aloof, cool superhero that just seems to be pervasive everywhere else.
Where every superhero is Iron Man now.
Yeah. And I'm just like, no, you don't need to be, like even Iron Man now is like an emotional point. Like you watch Endgame and like all Tony Stark is wall-to-wall emotions in that movie. I think people took some of the wrong lessons from Iron Man, because at least in the first movie, especially in Iron Man, Tony Stark is a full-fledged character. He's snarky. He keeps everyone at bay, but that's part of the character. That's part of his growth as he goes through that movie. But people saw that and they're like, oh, they like quippy superheroes. And so now everybody's just snarking off like Tony Stark did. And it's like,
and yet they somehow can't make the one that should be snarky Spider-Man actually snarky anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
just
they even make him Iron Man Jr. and they can't make him snarky.
And they can't make him snarky.
Ridiculous. Yeah. It's ridiculous. Oh, we're not going to get on a Far From Home tangent, but that is the worst Spider-Man movie by far, and I will die on that hill.
I would rather watch Morbius and both Venom movies than watch that again.
Yep.
Wow.
Agreed. Wait, 100%.
Wait. Far From Home.
Yeah, the one where he goes to Europe.
The European one.
Mysterio is awesome, though.
He's the only good part.
Jake Gyllenhaal's the only good part. And I still will never forgive that movie. Sorry, side tangent. I still will never forgive that movie for making his whole motivation is Tony Stark was mean to me a decade ago. And they reveal that through him just popping a bottle of champagne and introducing all of his henchmen and telling them the plan that they presumably already know.
Yeah.
Far From Home just drives me nuts.
But you forgot the best part of where Spider-Man, Peter Parker, literally tells Happy Hogan, I want to be my own man. I don't want to be Iron Man Jr.
And then they needle drop back in black.
They needle drop back in black while he's building a mechanical suit.
It's so bad. It's so
Far From Home is awful. Anyway, Hellboy 2 rules.
Far From Home.
If y'all like Spider-Man Far From Home, I will not hold it against you. I have my own really bad movie takes too, so I don't know. Yeah.
Sam likes Last Jedi, so we all have bad takes. Anyway,
one question that came in here, you guys. I'm actually just peeking at the comments here, and this is actually a really good one. Didn't the villain in Iron Man 3 get mad at Stark a long time ago? Too?
That's literally every Iron Man and every Spider-Man villain until No Way Home is that they all hate Tony Stark.
Iron Man 4 is going to be about someone who didn't get accepted on Facebook as a friend.
Tony Stark left him a bad tip at the restaurant.
One star on Yelp. Villain. Boom.
It's pretty much all their origin stories, yeah.
Tony Stark door dinged me in a Costco parking lot. I'm gonna kill everybody now.
You know what you should do really on the anniversary of Iron Man is make an activity of coming up with the next villain origin and see who comes up with the best one.
It's just really bad stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man.
It's like the Tony Stark in high school worked at Subway and accidentally put extra lettuce on your sub, and you're like, I hate this guy forever.
Why was Tony Stark working at Subway in high school?
I don't know.
Wasn't he like 11 in high school?
Yeah.
He's just getting around those child labor laws.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I just do this to get out of the house. My old man sucks.
He has to get out of the house. His parents are dead.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's wrap up this conversation before we get too far off.
Hey, look, it was good. It was good that we got to our main topic so quickly, since we went wildly off topic multiple times.
This was just an excuse for us to finally get to shit on Far From Home on this podcast.
Didn't know how we were going to get there, but we got there.
We got there, yeah.
John, thanks for talking these movies with us. This has been fun.
So like I said, these two though, I'm super newbie at, but I am looking forward to getting more of my books read and stuff. So by the time a new Blade comes out, I'm going to be like, guys, it wasn't true because of X, Y, and Z, according to this book, and I'll be able to.
The Blood Pack shows up in issue number 13 of
Volume
Blade.
1.
Yeah. We should have you back on for when
Blade
the new
Trinity.
Blade comes out.
Yep.
For sure.
Oh yeah.
Oh, don't make me watch Blade Trinity for this podcast.
We'll watch Blade Trinity and Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance.
Why? Why would you do that?
Can we drink on that episode then? Because
yes,
feel like
absolutely.
Uh-huh.
Oh.
We'll drink like Fireball so we can all piss fire like Nicolas Cage does. Spirit of Vengeance. Yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap this thing up then. We've been wildly off topic for the last 10 minutes, but that's okay. That's how this show goes. So that was our Sequel Del Toro episode, Blade 2, Hellboy 2. Please, if you're listening, let us know your thoughts on both of those, and let us know how much Far From Home sucks as well. Sam, let's get to the plugs for this show. Where can people listen to this podcast and any other podcasts that we put out?
Well, you can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, and until it goes away, Google Podcasts.
It goes away in 2 weeks or something like that. So
is it just getting merged into like YouTube or something? I don't know.
YouTube, I think it's getting merged into like YouTube Music or YouTube Podcast to start. I don't understand. I don't know.
So, whatever Google Podcast turns into, just watch us on YouTube. Save yourself some time. So you can subscribe there. Leave a review if you want. Like, that helps us bump up in the algorithm. Plus, we always like hearing nice things about us. If you don't have nice things to say, don't leave us a review. Don't be that guy.
Well, leave us a 5-star review and then say things.
Yeah, rate us 5 stars and you can say whatever you want about us.
It's true.
You can also follow us on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. And we have been doing some Instagram or some TikTok videos. Getting better at that, getting more consistent with posting that. So it's been fun. Check us out there. I had someone watch. I had over 1,000 people watch something I did. That's never happened before. That's insane. So yeah. Be one of the thousands of people that watch our TikTok.
That watch our TikToks.
Yeah.
My plugs that I got to throw out here. I need to throw out that we can. I don't know. Not we. We already did it. We bought stuff. We bought stuff on our merch store. The people out there can buy stuff from our merch store. That is tpublic.com. You can simply just search Screams from the Basement. You can find us there. I believe every other week they do 35% off sales. So you can get $16 t-shirts on there. Sam put it up an awesome new design of him and I in zombie form up on our TeePublic store. Mine should be hopefully arriving sometime this week. My t-shirt.
If you want to see one in action, I'm actually wearing it in one of our recent TikToks. So yeah, I don't know. I'm going to toot my own horn. I think it's a pretty sweet design.
It is a pretty sweet design. We got to figure out what else we got to use that design for more stuff because that's how cool it is.
Yeah, I'm gonna work on some stuff because like maybe a new podcast intro with it and all that kind of stuff. Like we've got some cool stuff coming up. That's what I'm saying.
Speaking of cool stuff coming up, you can go to shop.fangoria.com/screams from the basement. You can use that as our affiliate link. You can also use discount code screams from the basement to get 20% off your Fangoria order. That includes your annual subscription or any other merch that you want to buy to represent Fango. So again, use our affiliate link and then use our discount code to save 20% on anything and everything from our friends at Fangoria. John, last but not least, where can the people find you online and anything else you want to plug about your goings on?
Yes. So for the streaming side of things, get spooky with me, Comics by Night on the Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. It will be coming back with like a bone-chilling vengeance at some point. I can't let these beautiful intro videos that these two gentlemen helped shoot and plan and design for me go to waste. So we will be back this year reading more dreadfully awesome reads. So I'm looking forward to that. You can catch me hanging out with the boys. A comic book look is 4 of us mighty comic book nerds just talking about books. Usually every Wednesday we're always on summer operating hour. So once in a while we just want to take a break off. But we just talk about anything. Really, word has it we might be talking about the Suicide Squad video game coming up. That was other Sam's idea. So that's a thing. So a comic book look. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, X gonna give it to you. So that's a thing. And then I actually have a new stream launching in a couple of weeks here. Undercover Comic Reviews will be myself and my friend Sean.
Nice.
And that one will not be a live video. It'll just be a steady drip. We're actually taking on Alpha Flight Volume 1, starting from the 80s. It's 130 issues, and we're going to do it issue by issue, step by step. So looking forward to that. And then on top of all that, like I said, I am one of 3 people rocking and rolling with Team Bamboo Panel Studios, making our own comic books. And so coming up on Friday at the Super Snowball event, we are going to start selling our Ash Can, which is a preview issue of our projects to come. If you're planning on attending SuperCon this year, we will be there as a vendor as well with 2 new projects ready to rock and roll. So stay tuned for that. Tune into our social medias, Instagram, Facebook, X, lol. And we'll share some details about our upcoming Kickstarters. If you're in the Sioux Falls area, we'll also be sharing details about our physical release parties for those books too. So more to come on all that. Awesome. I think that's all I have going on. I don't know.
That's a lot going on, John.
That's a lot, John.
So
I'm tired just listening to all that you are doing. I mean, I'm already tired. Like this week is already taken out of me. It's only Tuesday, but my God, man, do you ever slow down?
No. I don't. No. But, I got to say, you guys are just, it's so cool to see you just succeeding with the show. And thank you for all of your work and for what you bring, to SuperCon and also just to the film community. And it's just been so fun getting to know you guys over the years. So.
Absolutely, John. Thanks for coming on the show, man. It's great to see you doing what you're doing. Yeah, your live shows are so much fun when I can catch them, and yeah, love listening to you talk about comics, man. It's great. It's great.
I have one more plug I got to throw in here before we go. Just because I need to match how many plugs John had. We need to plug our interviews that we got going on here at Screams from the Basement. Cool. We just did an interview on Founders Day with the writer, director, and star Eric Bloomquist. That movie is in theaters right now, so you can go check it out in your local multiplex and then check out our interview with Eric as well. It's a fantastic interview. Kind of go deep dive into that movie, and we talk some Boy Meets World on that as well. So shout out my Boy Meets World fans. And next interview that we have, speaking of comic books, John, you know this guy very well. We have Dylan Jacobson joining us to
Oh,
talk about his comic book that has just reached its complete run, Champions. So we're going to be talking about that with a friend of the show, Dylan Jacobson. Super excited to have him on and chat. Our first interview with someone who wrote a comic book. So John, if you have any other hookups that way, send them our way.
Okay. I will definitely keep you in mind for sure.
All
Are you guys dabbling more into like just different mediums then, like writers of different things, or?
Oh yeah, I think horror.
Yeah,
anything horror adjacent. You know, like, Dylan's stuff definitely has like a darker edge to it and a little bit more of a. I mean, Champions has like a literal killer clown in it, so it's pretty great. Yeah.
And he's just an amazing guy, too.
Oh, he is. He's great.
Yeah. All right, cool. Well, let's wrap this thing up. Sam, do you have any other final thoughts before we hit the end button?
Just that I would have loved for Guillermo Del Toro to be able to disappoint us with a messy, bloated, overstuffed third Hellboy movie. Like Raimi before him and Nolan after. Come on, give me a messy, sloppy Hellboy 3 that doesn't live up to the hype and kind of tanks the trilogy. Because as much as I complain about The Dark Knight Rises and Spider-Man 3, still happy those movies exist. So, anyways.
Maybe that will happen one day in our dreams, Sam. Speaking of dreams, well, let's wrap this thing up. Thank you all again for listening. This has been Screams from the Basement podcast. That's our guest, Jon Runyan, co-host Sam, co-host Casey. We will check you all later, and sweet screams.
You're listening to the Prescribed Films Podcast Network, home to hundreds of hours of free podcast entertainment. The shows on this network all have a common goal, providing you with the best discussions about movies and other forms of entertainment media. The PFPN hopes to fill your earholes with audio joy. Visit our website with links to all the other amazing shows at www.thepfpn.com. Thanks for listening.